In the quiet of the evening, where shadows softly play, a fairy tale wolf sheds his skin, gently drifting away, with a twinkle in his eye and a heart full of dreams. He waits for the Friday night glow, where the magic redeems. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. He picks up a book, the pages worn and wise, every line a whisper under the vast skies, from far off lands where the wild things roam, to enchanted forests where the heart finds home. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. With every word he reads, he casts a spell of peace, transporting all who listen to a land where joy...
Nope. Wrong button. There we go. Nothing to see here. I convinced myself to try to get a stream controller, and I got one of the cheap ones that was advertised on Amazon. So I've got buttons. And apparently they work. Apparently works fairly well. I don't have to hit them very hard or anything else. But yeah, welcome in. It's Friday night. And it being Friday night, it also means it's a night for fairy tales. And I got another model finally delivered to me today. Not sure how often I'm going to use it. It's hard to say, kind of the least like me. It's not a bad model. It did a lot of artwork in it, but it's not fan artsy style, which, going with a furry artist versus live studio 2D artist, there's a big difference. But I posted the video with all 5. I say 5 because technically I have 2 rigged versions of this one. This is actually the second one that has all my hotkeys on it. The hotkeys I do not have rigged to my controller yet. But anyway, it's Friday night. You have survived another week. Now you get to relax, hopefully. And I have to ask, is my microphone picking up alright? Because I actually had to turn down the volume on my side. And it's still showing that I'm speaking in normal range. So I don't know what my audio would have changed, because normally I have to, like, amplify myself. So do I sound okay? But, anyway. I also posted that I'm eating Scooby snacks again. I can't help it, they're good. I actually got enough on Twitch last night that I could actually buy some. Which are like, the boxes I get are like maybe $3.50 a box, which is, I think, an 11 or 12 ounce box of them, as opposed to the $4 box you can get that are like a 12 pack of 1 ounce ones, which, you know, do the math. I kind of wish they sold bigger bags of them. The ones I have listed on my throne list, I think, are 40 ounce boxes of them, which means it's pretty much just got 40 of the 1 ounce bags in it. But I got it in both cinnamon and the chocolate ones on the list. They made a vanilla one. I would love to find it. But, you know, cinnamon's good. Of the ones I've tried, the cinnamon tend to be thicker and crunchier, which is, I just like crunchy food in the first place. Especially, you know, crunchy bones. I mean. Honestly, I would like use these for pie crust if I thought about it. It's just, you know, graham cracker, just a lot denser than a graham cracker. You guys are cut and stamped. I think I've got some bone shaped candy molds. But last time I got a lot of these, I melted butterscotch chips because I also really like butterscotch. And I just coated them with this, so they all had a thin coat of butterscotch. I made them a little bit softer because, you know, the liquid from the melted chips soaked into them. Damn, they were tasty. Kind of want to see if I can make a coffee glaze. I mean, not like it wouldn't be hard to do. I've got espresso flavored chocolate chips. Let's melt those and coat these things. Ugh. Then I get coffee bones. Sounds really good. I've got 4 more of these out of the package that I'm going to eat before I switch over to streams. I'll switch over Windows. But I got one of the little U-Studio controllers because, well, Razer apparently stopped making them. And the company that was working with Razer to make them, which would have been really cool to have because it's Loop Box, which L-O-U-P is wolf. So then I could have had a wolf box. That would have gone with all the rest of the Razor stuff I've ended up with. But now I got a little, it was maybe $35 on sale, so $40 with taxes. Crunchy. Not the controller. The controller was pretty good to the touch. I kind of accidentally flipped through the buttons since I don't have picture labels on all the other ones yet. I just have labels on them right now for the library, the study, and for my gaming scenes. I don't have one. I thought I had one for the opening. It's for the start stream. I'd put an animated clapboard. It was there when I started. It's not there now. But I have one for the regular opening, the outside the outside the bookshop opening. I had one for the Be Right Back window, which I may see if I can make my own on that one. I don't know. I left one I have, but I'm upgrading everything else as what I can. I like my closing one, which my original open, my close, the chat that I don't use anymore, the Be Right Back, and my closing one were all made by the same person. Dang it, Rupin just went live. How can I harass my favorite princess if I'm streaming? Oh, it said she was streaming. Apparently she's having technical issues because she's not on. Anyway. Stream Elements is posting that she came on. But I guess not. So anyway, switch back to my screen. 3 buttons left. I will go ahead and change windows over to the library, so with the mighty push the button. Oh, come on. There we go.
With all due respect, if you're still selling your magic cards using a typical buy list, you're doing way too much for way too little. Traditional buy listing is an absolute pain. You have to organize cards, grade them, figure out who actually wants them, price check them, and inevitably realize you're going to have to ship multiple packages to different places. If they still even want them by the time you get everything packed up.
There's a wolf opening offering to endorse Scooby Snacks.
That's why more and more players are using card
as
conduit.
they are
They handle the sorting,
and
the
his
grading,
favorite
and
cookie.
optimizing the value of your cards. They take care of everything and you get a single simple payment minus a fee. And if you want to get even more bang for your buck, you can send the cards pre-sorted with their sorted service. Card Conduit is perfect for the cards you've been sitting on that you know are worth moving.
Why do I hear an ad?
Card Conduit, you get paid more with way less effort.
No,
and that's still not counting.
Okay. For a YouTube channel that claims it doesn't do ads, it does a lot of ads. Anyway, I'm on my last one, I swear. For now. You guys hear the crunching? I'm gonna have to listen to the log to hear my crunch. The microphone doesn't really show it. But anyway, it is Friday. And Friday, we do fairy tales. I remember way back when I started, I was doing folk tales on Thursdays and fairy tales on Fridays. and games whenever the hell. I am still trying to get to where I can do games on like Monday, because it's like the only day that's very few of my other friends are streaming, except those that stream every day. But yeah, I really do want to start doing game streams on Mondays. And one of my video cards, well, the video card built into my motherboard processor did a driver update twice today. So hopefully that'll be a little bit more stable. Anyway, yeah, fairy tales. That's what we are here to do. And it is already 9:13. And the sound is right. Everyone? Anyone? Fry. Okay. Nuschlandischem Volksmasche. I would be greatly amused if I read all these in German. But I would have to improve my German a lot. But anyway, our first fairy tale for this fabulous Friday night. Now, Geirald the Coward was punished. Once upon a time there lived a poor knight who had a great many children, and found it very hard to get enough for them to eat. One day he sent his eldest son, Rosold, the brave and honest youth, to the neighboring town to do some business. And here Rosold met a young man named Geirald, with whom he made friends. Now Geirald was the son of a rich man who was proud of the boy, and had all his life allowed him to do whatever he fancied. And luckily for the father, he was prudent and sensible, and did not waste money, as many other rich men might have done. For some time he had set his heart on traveling into foreign countries, and after he had been talking for a little while to Rosold, he asked if his new friend would be his companion on a journey. "There's nothing I should like better," answered Rosold, shaking his head sorrowfully. "But my father is very poor, and he could never give me the money." "Oh, well, if that's your only difficulty, it is all right," cried Geirald. "My father has more money than he knows what to do with, and he will give me as much as I want for both of us. Only, there is one thing you must promise me, Rosold, that supposing we have many adventures, you will let the honor and glory of them fall on me." "Yes, of course, that is only fair," answered Rosold, who never cared for putting himself forward. "But I cannot go without telling my parents. I'm sure they will think me lucky to get such a chance." As soon as the business was finished, Rosold hastened home. His parents were delighted to hear of his good fortune, and his father gave him his own sword, which was growing rusty for the want of use, while his mother saw that the leather jerkin was in order. "Be sure you keep the promise you made to Geirald," she said, and she bade him goodbye. "And come with me, see that you never betray him." Full of joy, Rosold rode off, and the next day he and Geirald started off to seek adventure. To their disappointment, their own land was so well governed that nothing out of the common was very likely to happen. But directly they crossed the border to another kingdom, all seemed lawlessness and confusion. They had not gone very far when, riding across a mountain, they caught a glimpse of several armed men hiding amongst the trees in their path, and remembered suddenly some talk they had heard of a band of 12 robbers who lay in wait for rich travelers. The robbers were more like savage beasts than men lived somewhere at the top of the mountain in caves and holes in the ground. They were called the Hunker, and were distinguished one another by the name of the color, blue, gray, red, and so on, except for the chief, who was known as Hunker the Tall. All this and more rushed into the minds of the two young men when they saw the flash of their swords in the moonlight. Sorry. It is impossible to fight them. They're 12 and 2, whispered Geirald, stopping his horse in the path. We had much better ride back and take the lower road. It would be stupid to throw away our lives like this. Oh, we can't turn back, answered Roswald. We would be ashamed to look anyone in the face again. Besides, it is a grand opportunity to show you what we are made of. Let us tie up our horses here and climb up the rocks so that we can roll stones down on them. We might try that, and then we still always have our horses, said Geirald. So they went up the rocks, silently and carefully. The robbers were lying all ready, expecting every moment to see their victims coming around the corner a few yards away, when a shower of huge stones fell on their heads, killing half of the band. The others sprang up the rock, but as they reached the top, the sword of Roswald swung around, and one man after another rolled down into the valley. At last the chief managed to spring up, and, grasping Roswald by the waist, flung away his sword, and the two fought desperately, their bodies swaying always near the edge. It seemed as if Roswald, being the smaller of the two, must fall over, when with his left hand he drew the robber's sword out of his sheath and plunged it into his heart. He then took the dead man, a beautiful ring set with a large stone, and put it on his own finger. The fame of this wonderful deed soon spread through the country, and people would often stop Geirald's horse and ask leave to see the robber's ring, which he was said to have stolen from the father of the reigning king. And Geirald showed them the ring with pride, and listened to their words with praise, and no one would have ever guessed anyone else had destroyed the robbers. In a few days they left the kingdom and rode to another, where they thought they would stop through the remainder of the winter, for Geirald liked to be comfortable, and did not care about traveling through ice and snow. But the king would only grant them leave to stop on one condition. Before the winter ended, they should give him some fresh proof of courage which he had heard so much. Roswald's heart was glad at the king's message, and as for Geirald, he felt that as long as Roswald was there, all would go well. So they both bowed and replied that it was the king's place to command, and theirs to obey. Well then, said his majesty, this is what I want you to do. In the northeast part of my kingdom there dwells a giant, who has an iron staff 20 yards long, and he is so quick in using it that even 50 knights have no chance against him. The bravest and strongest young men of my court have fallen under blows of that staff, but as you overcame 12 robbers so easily, I feel that I have reason to hope that you may be able to conquer the giant. In 3 days from this, you will set out. We will be ready, your majesty, answered Roswald, but Geirald remained silent. How can we possibly fight against a giant that has killed 50 knights? Cried Geirald when they were outside the castle. The king only wants to get rid of us. He won't think about us for the next 3 days. That is one comfort, and so we shall have plenty of time to cross the borders of the kingdom and be out of reach. We mayn't be able to kill the giant, but we certainly can't run away till we've tried, answered Roswald. Besides, think how glorious it will be if we do manage to kill him. I know what sort of weapon I shall use. Come with me now, and I will see about it. And, taking his friend by the arm, he led him to a shop where he bought a huge lump of solid iron, so big that they could hardly lift it between the two of them. However, they just managed to carry it to a blacksmith's, where Roswell directed that it should be beaten into a thick club with a sharp spike on one end. When this was done to the liking, he took it under his arm. Very early the third morning, the two men started on their journey, and on the fourth day they reached the giant's cave before he was even out of bed. Hearing the sound of footsteps, the giant got up and went to the entrance to see who was coming. And Roswell, expecting something of the sort, struck him such a blow to the forehead that he fell to the ground. Then, before he could rise to his feet again, Roswell drew out his sword and cut off his head. It was... ouch. It was not so difficult after all, you see, he said, turning to Geirald, and placing the giant's head on a leather wallet he slung over his back. They began their journey back to the castle. As they drew near the gates, Roswell took the head from the wallet and handed it to Geirald, whom he followed into the king's presence. "The giant will trouble you no more," said Geirald, holding out the head. And the king fell on his neck and kissed him, and cried joyfully that he was the bravest knight in all the world, and that a feast should be made for him and Roswell, and that the great deed should be proclaimed throughout the kingdom. And Geirald's heart swelled with pride, and he almost forgot that it was Roswell and not he who had slain the giant. By and by a whisper went round that a beautiful lady who lived in the castle would be present at the feast, with 24 lovely maidens for her attendants. The lady was the queen of her own country, but as her father and mother had died when she was a little girl, she had been left in the care of the king, who was her uncle. She was now old enough to govern her own kingdom, but her subjects did not like being ruled by a woman, and said that she must find a husband to help her in managing her affairs. Prince after prince had offered himself, but the young queen would have nothing to say to any of them, and at last she told her ministers that if she was to have a husband at all, she must choose him for herself, as she would certainly not marry any of those whom they had selected for her. The ministers replied that in that case she had better manage her kingdom alone, and the queen, who knew nothing about business, got things in such a confusion that she threw them up together and so went off to her uncle. Now when she heard how the two men had slain the giant, her heart was filled with admiration and courage, and she declared that if a feast was held, she would certainly be present at it. And so she was. And when the feast was over, she asked the king, her guardian, if he would allow the two heroes who killed the robbers and slain the giants to fight a tournament the next day with one of her pages. The king gladly gave his consent and ordered the lists to be made ready, never doubting that the two great champions would be eager for such a chance that aided to their fame. Little did he guess that Geirald had done all he could to persuade Roswell to steal secretly out of the castle during the night. For, he said, I don't believe that the pages at all, and they're well-proven knights, and how can we, so young and untried, stand up against them? The honor will be all the higher if we gain the day, answered Roswell. But Geirald would not listen, and only declared that he did not care about honor, and would rather be alive than have every honor in the world heaped upon him. He would go, and as Roswell had sworn to give him his company, he must come with him. Roswell was very much grieved when he heard these words, but he knew that it was useless attempting to persuade Geirald, and turned his thoughts from forming some plan to prevent this disgraceful fight. Suddenly, his face brightened. Let us change clothes, he said, and I will do the fighting, while you shall get all the glory. Nobody will ever know. And to this, Geirald readily consented. Whether Geirald was right or not in thinking that the so-called page was really a well-powered knight, it is certain that Roswell's task was a very hard one. 3 times they came together with a crash that made their horses reel. Once Roswell knocked off the helmet of his foe, and received in return a blow that he staggered in the saddle. Shouts went up from the lookers-on. One and then the other seemed gaining victory, but at length Roswell planted a spear in the armor which uncovered his adversary's breast, and bore him steadily backwards. "Unhorsed! Unhorsed!" cried the people, and Roswell then dismounted and helped his adversary to rise. In the confusion that followed, it was easy for Roswell to slip away and return Geirald to his proper pose, and in turn, the torn and dusty from the fight, Geirald answered the king's summons to come before him. "You've done what I expected you to do," he said, "and now choose your reward." "Grant me, sir, the hand of the queen, your niece," replied the young man, bowing low, "and I will defend her kingdom against all her enemies." "She should choose no better husband," said the king, "and if she consents, I do too." And he turned towards the queen, who had not been present during the fight, but had just slipped into a seat by his right hand. Now the queen's eyes were very sharp, and it seemed to her that the man who stood before her, tall and handsome though he might be, was different in many slight ways, and in one particular from the man who fought the tourney. How could there be any trickery she could not understand, and why the real victor would be willing to give up his prize to another was still stranger. But something in her heart wanted her to be careful. She answered, "You must be satisfied, uncle, but I am not. One more proof I must have. Let the two men now fight against each other. The man I marry must be the man who killed the robbers and the giant and overcame my page." Geirald's face grew pale as he heard these words. He knew there was no escape from it now, though he did not doubt for one moment that Roswell would keep his compact loyal to the last. But how would it be possible that even Roswell should deceive the watchful eyes of the king and his court, and still more those of the young queen, whom he felt uneasily had suspected him from the first? The tourney was fought, and in spite of Geirald's fears, Roswell managed to hang back to make attacks which were never meant to succeed, and to allow strokes which he could easily have parried to attain their end. At length, after a great show of resistance, he fell heavily to the ground, and as he fell he knew it was not alone, and the glory that was his rightfully which he gave up, but the hand of the queen that was more precious still. But Geirald did not even wait to see if he was wounded. He went straight to the wall where the royal banner waved and claimed the reward which was now his. The crowd of watchers turned towards the queen, expecting to see her stoop and give some token to the victor. Instead, to the surprise of everyone, she merely smiled and said that before she bestowed her hand one more test must be imposed, and this should be the last. A final tourney must be fought. Roswell and Geirald should meet singly 2 knights of the king's court, and he whom could unhorse his foe should be master of herself and her kingdom. The combat was fixed to take place at 10 o'clock the following day. All night long, Geirald walked about his room, not daring to face the fight that lay in front of him, and trying with all his might to discover some means of escaping it. All night long he moved restlessly from door to window, and when the trumpet sounded and the combatants rode into the field, he alone was missing. The king sent messengers to see what had become of him, and he was found, trembling with fear, hiding under his bed. After that, there was no need of further proof. The combat was declared unnecessary, and the queen pronounced herself quite satisfied, and ready to accept Roswell as her husband. "You forgot one thing," she said when they were alone. "I recognized my father's ring which hangs with a tall stone on the finger of your right hand, and knew that it was not you and not Arnold. And I knew it was you and not Geirald who had slain the robber band. I was the page who fought you, and again saw the ring on your finger, though it was absent from his when he stood before me to claim his promise. That was why I ordered the combat between you, though your faith to your word prevented my plan from succeeding. But I had to try another. A man who keeps his promise at all costs to himself is a man I can trust, both for myself and for my people." So they married, and returned to their kingdom, which they ruled well and happily. And many years after, a poor beggar knocked at the palace gates and asked for money, for the sake of days gone by. And this was Geirald. Okay, that was a good one. I can't say that I wouldn't stand in place for someone else's fights, but that's also me. This is another one from the Newsländischen Volksmarcher. Hello, welcome in. How are you doing tonight? Shoot. Barely. I've got two fans blowing on me that I'm hoping the mic filter's walking out. All I can think is, at least it might rain. That is tricky. Because a lot of it would have to deal with how one of her 6-year books is turning yellowish. Dang. A lot of it would really depend on what kind of paper it is. Like, most of the time, I usually start, well, the ones I print, I usually do the print code anyway, so I was going to have a tendency to start with. But as far as the 66% humidity, then it would really depend on, oh, in Puerto Rico? Yeah, that would be a little bit difficult. Let's see, I'm trying to think of that one. I'll probably, well, how big of a silica packet are you looking at? If the bag itself has a decent seal, you wouldn't have to worry about it as much, but then you also have to worry about a small one. Like a 25-gram one, or I'm trying to think of the big one. The 50-gram? Okay. I should be okay with just the 50-gram, really. A lot of it depends on not only, well, the bag seal, the storage area it's in, because a lot of times just sunlight will add to the yellowing of the pages. I've got a couple of books that it's just not in, oh, in a sunlight room that's always in the sunlight. It's like, for me, it would be southern exposure. The heat will help to affect it too. Okay, they're in the corner. Interior, exterior. Like an interior corner would have less adverse effects, and yeah, it's hard to stop heat, especially in Jamaica. Okay, so an interior one is going to be a little bit less exposed to thermal from the walls, so a single should really do it. I found out that you don't want the books to get too dry because that'll, well, depending on the book, it could, using WC bags, check that real quick. This BWC usually does get a fairly good seal, but it's still a little open at the top. It's not like a full zip seal or anything on it. Because I use, I think I've got my comics in BWC right now. Oh. Do you ever plan on reading it? With the autographed, you really don't want the moisture to get to the signature, because most of the inks aren't doing that. Because a lot of the ways I do things is I have a tendency to get 2 copies of books that I know I'm going to read a lot of. Then I'll have a reading copy, then storage copy. You know, kind of the way some people do comic books. As far as the signed one, you may double bag that one. So, I definitely have to protect that signature. Yeah, something like that, I'd probably use the 50 gram and double bag it if you're not going to read it. Single bag it if you're going to take it out occasionally. It must last until you die. Oh. Considering the age of some of the books I have and the condition they're in, a lot of books are fairly durable, and since that would be, I'm guessing, probably a modern copy. If you had them sign an older copy, that would be like, cool. But if it's if the book itself is within the last decade, it should be fairly durable in the first place. And for newer books, the main way it would break down is more spinal issues in paper. Because I think some of the couple of my 100-year-old books, they're more cover damage than anything else. As if the cover stays closed, the only real coloring it would be around the edges. Dang. 6-year-old books already turning yellowish? Yeah, I'm the same way with hardbacks. Like, if I'm going to get a copy to travel with, I'll get a paperback, but hardbacks, I keep on my shelves when I need them. But if it's already breaking down that much, I would go ahead and double bag it with a single. That way you don't have to worry about anything else really damaging it. Oh, you can KO someone. Oh, it's one of the good heavy ones. But yeah, if it's already starting to get yellowish, I'd go ahead and get it protected. I don't think books should really yellow that fast unless it's just environment. So what size book is it? With the way it being that way, it'd have to be one of the heavier, or one of the larger copies. Hardcover of the last red queen. Just look that up real quick. Is that the one that's in the sleeve? Okay. Trying to think of what the measurements ought to be like, so specifications. Okay, the 11 by 6. Make sure it's right one again. Yeah, that's definitely a good book. Yeah, something like that, I would definitely try to double bag just to keep it safe. But with it being double bagged, you probably wouldn't need more than just the 150 gram. But you'd have to make sure that the bag's not tight, otherwise the silica packet would probably leave dents in the cover. 250 grams. Yeah, I should be fine with that. Just press out 3x5. Yeah, if you loose bag that one, you might be able to put one front and back. I said the bag would have to be loose just to make sure that it's not pressing into the cover, though. But I would definitely double bag that one just to keep it safe. You know, that and having the silica in the front and the back of it would also, help balance out the moisture redistribution if it has any. So I think one of the archivers I listened to, it says usually about book storage about maybe 30% at the most, I think. That way it won't dry out the paper completely. I'd have to look into my archiving books and double check that, but I'm not sure where they are right now. Let's see, did I have them bookmarked? Serving. Okay. Yeah, it says optimum relative humidity is between 30 and 55. Okay. Okay. But yeah, if you can keep it the double bagged, humidity between 30 and 55, so it may actually take both of the silica. Actually, let me post the link that I've got for this. But yeah, if you got the acid-free BWC, it should be good. Just the whole bags to prevent the moisture buildup. That should be fine, really. Let's just say interior wall, it's going to be a little bit lower temperature. Also a little bit stabler air, I'm going to say. I'm going to pop up to advertise. And I've got ads popping up in a minute. So did you have any other questions about it? Because keeping old books is important because you don't want those books to just vanish, and especially if they're signed by Elijah Wood. I know how to tell how old the book is. Normally I just look for the copyright page on it, because it'll usually say which printing and which edition. And if that doesn't work, I usually just look at the book. Normally the book is 6 years old because of person. Okay. Said inside cover, there should be a copyright page on it. And the copyright will essentially say when the edition is. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. Show resources. Why did that crowd control timer turned off? Yeah, the ads are a pain. Okay, that helps a lot. Let's see, that was originally published 2006. Now that ISBN number. Don't see any updated numbers for it. But that is what I'm seeing on that ISBN. Now you probably have 2024. If it says that they made a revised edition, it's going to be a newer edition because they wouldn't know about it in the first edition. is... So the one on the top of that list is the most recent printing that I have listed anyway. I would think they would make the revised edition a different ISBN. It's typically when they do a revision, but typically when they do a revision, they assign it a new number. But it'll usually say which print edition it is. A lot of times they'll update the copyright on the newest version. Just like sometimes when they do a reprint, they'll change the cover art. And then they'll relist it under that listing. The ISBN usually stays with the original transcript. But if anything else, is to look at that Thriftbooth link, it'll show you all the editions they've printed of it. So you can tell by the cover art which printing it is. But first editions are out there. If it only has the original print date, it's possible. Okay, when it's done like that, usually the highest number is likely the edition you have. Because when they're doing the editions like that, they'll count how many releases it's had. Ugh. Yeah, you mentioning the numbers made me look one up and saw someone had a first edition listed on eBay, but they took a picture of the print marks, and it's at 10. And honestly, the book printed in 1986 would not list anything past 1986. It can't read the future. As long as the book is in good condition, it's good, but that's what I'm saying. When you mentioned having the numbers on the bottom, Nice. Hey, Leon. Yep. No, good condition for a paperback. Yeah, that's definitely doing good. Of course, that's 20th print. So if they did one series a year, still doing pretty good. And definitely good if the spine on the trade paperback's still good. So how's your night been, Leon?
I just found an amazing digital marketing expert on Fiverr.
There we go.
The company had its most effective campaign yet. Jerry wondered if his reaction was a bit much. It was.
Vanished.
Fiverr. Hire a freelancer today.
Let's have an ad for fiber. Edit. The internet is watching. That just gave me an ad for the book covers. Let's see. Bucky. Oh, that's what they just. So, our next story for this fabulous night of fairy tales. Habogi. Once upon a time there lived two peasants who had 3 daughters, and, as generally happens, the youngest was the most beautiful and most, well, best-tempered, and while her sisters wanted to go out, she was always ready to stay home and do their work. Years passed quickly with the whole family, and one day the parents suddenly perceived that all 3 girls were grown up, and that very soon they would be thinking of marriage. "Have you decided what your husband's name is to be?" said the father laughingly to his eldest daughter one evening when they were all sitting at the door of the cottage. "You know, that is a very important point."
"Yes, I will never wed any man who's not called Sigmund,"
answered she. "Well, it is lucky for you that there are a great many Sigmunds in this part of the world," replied her father, "so that you can take your choice. And what do you say?" he added, turning to the second.
"Oh, I don't think I could have anyone with a name no more beautiful than Sigurd,"
she cried. "Well, you won't be an old maid either," answered he. "There are 7 Sigurds in this village alone. And you, Helga?" As Helga was the youngest and prettiest of the 3, and she looked up. She also had her favorite name, but just as she was going to say it, he seemed to hear a voice whisper,
"Marry no one who's not called Habogi."
The girl had never heard that name before, and she did not like it, so she determined to pay no attention. But as she opened her mouth to tell her father that her husband must be named Njal, she found herself answering instead,
"If I do marry, it will be no one except a Habogi."
"Who's Habogi?" asked her father and sisters.
"We never heard of such a person."
"Oh, I can tell you that he will be my husband if I ever have one," returned Helga, and that was all she would say. Before very long, the young men who lived in the neighboring villages or on the sides of the mountains had heard of this talk of the 3 girls, and the Sigmunds and Sigurds in scores came to visit the little cottage. There were other young men, too, who bore different names, though not one of them was called Habogi. And these thought... Thank you for the follow. Yep, back to work. Have a good one. And these thought that they might perhaps gain the heart of the youngest. But though there were more than one Njal amongst them, Helga's eyes always seemed turned other ways. Rest well. At length, the 2 elder sisters made their choice from out of all the Sigurds and Sigmunds, and it was decided that both weddings should take place at the same time. Invitations were sent out to the friends and relations, and when, on the morning of the great day, they were all assembled, the rough, coarse old peasant left the crowd and came up to the bride's father. "My name is Habogi, and Helga must be my wife," was all he said. And though Helga stood pale and trembling with surprise, she did not try to turn and run away. "I cannot talk of such things just now," answered the father, who could not bear the thought of giving his favorite daughter to this horrible old man, and hoped by putting it off that something might happen. But the sisters, who had always been rather jealous of Helga, were secretly pleased that their bridegroom should outshine hers. When the feast was over, Habogi led up a beautiful horse from a field where he had left it to graze, and he bade Helga jump on its splendid saddle, all embroidered in scarlet and gold. "You shall come back again," said he, "but now you must see the house that you are to live in." And though Helga was very unwilling to go, something inside her forced her to obey. The old man settled her comfortably, then sprang up in front of her as easily as if he might have been a boy, and shaking the reins, they were soon out of sight. After some miles, they rode through a meadow with grass so green that Helga's eyes felt quite dazzled, and feeding on the grass were a quantity of large fat sheep, with the curliest and whitest wool in the world.
What lovely sheep! Whose are they?
Cried Helga. "Your Habogi's," answered he. "All that you see belongs to him, but the finest sheep in the whole herd, which has little golden bells hanging between its horns, you shall have for yourself." This pleased Helga very much, for she had never heard or had anything of her own, and she smiled quite happily as she thanked Habogi for his presents. They soon left the sheep behind and entered a large field with a river running through it, where a number of beautiful gray cows were standing by a grate, waiting for a milkmaid to come and milk them.
"Oh, what lovely cows!" cried Helga again. "I'm sure their milk must be sweeter than any other cow's. How I should love to have some. I wonder to whom they belong."
"To your Habogi," cried he. "And some day you shall have as much milk as you like, but we cannot stop now. Do you see that big gray one with the silver bells between her horns? That is to be yours, and you can have her milked every morning the moment you wake." And Helga's eyes shone as though she did not say anything. She thought that she would learn to milk the cow herself. A mile further on, they came to a wide common with a short, springy turf, where horses of all colors, with skins of satin, were kicking up their heels in play. The sight of them so delighted Helga that she had nearly sprang from her saddle with a shriek of joy.
"Whose are theirs? Oh, whose are they?" she asked. "How happy any man who is a master of such lovely creatures!"
"They are your Habogi's," replied he, "and one of which you think the most beautiful of all, you shall have for yourself, and learn to ride him." At this, Helga quite forgot the sheep and the cow.
"A horse of my own," said she. "Oh, stop one moment. Let me see which I will choose. The white one? No, the chestnut? No, I think after all I like the coal black one the best, with a little white star on his forehead. Oh, do stop, just for a minute."
But Habogi would not listen or stop. "When you are married, you will have plenty of time to choose one," was all he answered, and they rode on 2 or 3 miles further. At length, Habogi drew the rein before a small house, very ugly and mean-looking, and that seemed on the point of tumbling to pieces. "This is my house, and is to be yours," said Habogi, as he jumped down and held out his arms to lift Helga from the horse. The girl's heart sank a little, and she thought that the man who possessed such wonderful sheep, cows, and horses might have built himself a prettier place to live in, and she did not say so, and taking her arm, he led her up a few steps. But when she got inside, she stood quite bewildered at the beauty of all around her. None of her friends owned such things, not even the miller, who was the richest man he knew. There were carpets everywhere, thick and soft, and with such deep, rich colors, and cushions were of silk, and made you sleepy just to look at them. And curious little figures in china were scattered about. Helga felt as if it would take her all her life to see anything so pretty. And it only seemed a second that she'd entered the house when Habogi came up to her. "We must begin the preparations for our wedding at once," he said. "But my foster brother will take you home as I promised. In 3 days he will bring you back here with your parents and sisters and any guests you may invite in your company. By that time, the feast will be ready." Helga had so much to think about that the ride home appeared very short. Her father and mother were delighted to see her, and they did not feel sure that so ugly and cross-looking man as Habogi might not have played her some cruel trick. And after they had given her some supper, they begged her to tell them all she had done. But Helga only told him that they could see for themselves on the 3rd day, when they would come to her wedding. It was early the next morning when the party set out, and Helga's 2 sisters grew green with envy as they passed the flocks of sheep, cows, and horses, and heard all the best was given to Helga herself. But when they caught sight of the poor little house, which was to be her home, their hearts grew light again.
"I should be ashamed of living in such a place,"
whispered each to the other. And the older sister spoke of her carved stone over her doorway, and the second boasted of the numbers of rooms she had. But the moment they went inside, they were struck dumb with rage at the splendor of everything, and their faces grew white and cold with fury when they saw the dress which Habogi had prepared for his bride, a dress that glittered like sunbeams dancing upon ice.
"She shall not look so much finer than us,"
they cried passionately to each other as soon as they were alone. When night came, they stole out of the rooms, and taking out the wedding dress, they laid it in an ash pit and heaped ashes upon it. But Habogi, who knew a little magic, and had guessed that they would do that, changed the ashes into roses and cast a spell over the sisters, so that they could not leave the spot for a whole day, and everyone who passed by mocked at them. The next morning, when they all awoke, the ugly, tumble-down house had disappeared, and in its place stood a splendid palace. The guests' eyes sought in vain for the bridegroom, but could only see a handsome young man with a coat of blue velvet and silver, and a gold crown upon his head.
"Who is that?"
asked Helga.
"That is my Habogi,"
said she. Yay! Let's see, how long is this next story? What is the next story? Next story is 6 pages. Yeah, we can do that. Okay, this is another one from the Bureau of Ethnology. So technically an American story. How the little brother set free his big brothers. In a small hut, right in the middle of the forest, lived a man, his wife, 3 sons, and a daughter. For some reason, all the animals seemed to have left that part of the country, and food grew very scarce, so one morning, after a night of snow, when the tracks of beasts might be easily seen, the 3 boys started off to hunt. They kept together for some time, till they reached a place where the path had been fallen split in 2, and one of the brothers called his dog and went to the left, while the others took the trail to the right. These had not gone far when their dog scented a bear and drove him out of a thicket. The bear ran across a clearing, and the older brother managed to place an arrow right in his head. They both took up the bear and carried it towards home, meeting the third at a spot where they had parted from him. When they reached home, they threw the bear down on the floor of the hut, saying, "Father, here's the bear which we killed. Now we can have some dinner." But father, who was in a bad temper, only said, "When I was a young man, we used to get 2 bears in one day." And walk uphill both ways. Just nice. See? Parents never change. The 2 sons were rather disappointed at hearing this, and though 3 was plenty of meat for the last 2 or 3 days, they started off early in the morning down the same trail that they had followed before. As they drew near the fork, the bear suddenly ran out of the tree behind them and took the path to the right. The 2 elder boys and the dogs pursued him, and as soon as the second son, who was also a good shot, killed him instantly with an arrow. At the fork of the trail on their way home, they met the youngest, who had taken the left-hand road and had shot a bear for himself. But when they threw the 2 bears triumphantly on the floor of their hut, the father hardly looked at them and only said, "When I was a young man, we would get 3 bears in one day." The next day, they were luckier than before and brought back 3 bears, in which their father had told them that he always killed 4. However, that did not prevent him from skinning the bears and cooking them in a way of his own, which he thought was very good, and they all ate an excellent supper. Now, these bears were the servants of a great chief bear who lived in the high mountain a long way off, and every time a bear was killed, his shadow returned to the house of the bear chief, when the marks of his wounds plainly to be seen by the rest. The chief was furious at the number of bears the hunters had killed, and determined that he would find some way of destroying them. So he called another of his servants and said to him, "Go to the thicket where the trees... Go to the thicket near the fork where the boys killed your brothers, and directly they or their dogs will see you return here as fast as you can. The mountain will be open to let you in, and the hunters will follow you. And then I shall have them in my power and be able to revenge myself." The servant bowed low and started at once for the fork, where he hid himself from the bushes. By and by the boys came in sight, but this time there were only 2 of them. The youngest had stayed home. The air was warm and damp, and the snow soft and slushy, and the older brother's bowstring hung loose, while the bow of the younger caught a tree and snapped in half. At that moment the dogs began to bark loudly, and the bear rushed out of the thicket and set off in the direction of the mountain. Without thinking that they had nothing to defend themselves with, should the bear turn and attack them, the boys gave chase. The bear, who knew quite well that he could not be shot, sometimes slackened his pace and let the dogs get quite close, and in this way the elder son reached the mountain without observing it, while his brother, who had hurt his foot, was still fairly far behind. As he ran up, the mountain opened to admit the bear, and the boy, who was close on his heels, rushed in after him, and did not know where he was until he saw the bears sitting on every side of him, holding a council. The animal he had been chasing sank, panting in their midst, and the boy, very much frightened, stood still, letting his bow fall to the ground. "Why are you killing all my servants?" asked the chief. "Look round, and see their shades with arrows sticking in them. It was I who told the bear today he was to lure you into my power. I shall take care that you shall not hurt my people anymore, because you will become a bear yourself." At this moment the second brother came up, for the mountain had been left open on the purpose of tempting him also, and he cried out breathlessly, "Don't you see the bear is lying close to you? Why don't you shoot him?" And without waiting for a reply, he pressed forward to drive his arrow into the heart of the bear. But the older one caught his arm and whispered, "Be quiet. Can't you tell where you are? Then the boy looked up and saw the angry bears around him. On one side were the servants of the chief, and on the other were the servants of the chief's sister. He was rather sorry for the two youths, and begged that their lives might be spared. The chief answered that he would not kill them, but only cast a spell over them by which their heads and bodies should remain as they were, but their arms and legs should change into those of a bear. So they would go on all fours for the rest of their lives, and stooping over a spring of water, he dipped a handful of moss into it, and rubbed it over the arms and legs of the boys. In an instant, the transformation took place, and two creatures, neither beast nor human, stood before the chief. He gave them the right to bear arms. Now, the bear chief, of course, knew that the boy's father would seek for his sons when they did not return home, so he sent another of his servants to the hiding place at the fork of the trail to see what would happen. He had not waited long when the father came in sight, stooping as he went to look for his son's tracks in the snow. Well, he saw marks of snowshoes along the path on the right, filled with joy, not knowing that the servant had made fresh tracks on purpose to mislead him. And he hastened forward so fast that he fell headlong into a pit where the bear was sitting. Before he could pick himself up, the bear had quietly broken his neck, and hiding the body under the snow, sat down to see if anyone else would pass by. Meanwhile, the mother at home was wondering what had become of her two sons, and as hours went on and their father never returned, she made up her mind to go and look for him. The youngest boy begged her to let him undertake the search, but she would not hear of it, and told him he must stay at home and take care of his sister. So, slipping on her snowshoes, she started on her way. As no fresh snow had fallen, the trail was quite easy to find, and she walked straight on, till it led her up to the pit where the bear was waiting for her. He grasped her as she fell in and broke her neck, after which he laid her in the snow beside her husband, and went back to tell the bear chief. Hour after hour dragged heavily on in the snow in the forest hut, and at last the brother and sister felt quite sure that, in some way or other, all the family had perished. Day after day, the boy climbed to the top of a tall tree near the house, and sat there till he was almost frozen, looking on all sides through the forest openings, hoping that he might see someone coming along. Very soon all the food in the house was eaten, and he knew he would have to go out and hunt for more. Besides, he wished to seek for his parents. The little girl did not like being left alone in the hut, and cried bitterly, but her brother told her that there was no use sitting down quietly to starve, and that whether he found any game or not, he would certainly be back before the following night. Then he cut himself some arrows, each from a different tree, and winged with feathers of 4 different birds. Then he made himself a bow, very light and strong, and got down his snowshoes. All this took some time, and he could not start the day, but early next morning he called his little dog, Redmouth, whom he kept in a box, and set out. After he had followed the trail for a great distance, he grew very tired, and sat upon a branch of the tree to rest. But Redmouth barked so furiously that the boy thought that perhaps his parents might have been killed under the branches, and he stepped back and shot one of his arrows at the root of the tree, whereupon a noise like thunder shook from the top to bottom. A fire broke out. In a few minutes the little heap of ashes lay in its place where he had stood. Not knowing quite what to make of all this, the boy continued on the trail and went down to the right-hand fork till he came to a clump of bushes where the bears used to hide. Now, as was planned of being able to change the shape of the two brothers, the bear chief knew a good deal of magic, and he was quite aware that the little boy was following the trail, so he sent a small but clever bear servant to wait for him in the bushes and try to tempt him into the mountain. But somehow his spells could not have worked properly that day, as the bear chief did not know that Redmouth had gone with his master, or that he would have been more careful. For the moment the dog ran round the bushes, barking loudly, the little bear servant rushed out in a fright, and set out for the mountain as fast as he could. The dog followed the bear, and the boy followed the dog, until the mountain, the house of the great bear chief, came in sight. But along the road the snow was so wet and heavy that the boy could hardly get along, and then the thong of his snowshoes broke, and he had to stop and mend it, so that the bear and the dog got so far ahead that he could scarcely hear the barking. When the strap was firm again, the boy spoke to his snowshoes.
Now you must go as fast as you can, or if not, I shall lose the dog and the bear as well.
And the snowshoes sang in order that they would run with the wind. As he came along, the bear chief's sister was looking out for the window, and took pity on the little brother, as she had on the two elder ones, and waited to see what the boy would do, when he found that the bear servant and the dog had already entered the mountain. The little boy was certainly very much puzzled at not seeing anything of either of the animals, but had vanished suddenly out of his sight. He paused for an instant to think what he should do next, and while he did, he so fancied he heard Redmouth's voice on the opposite side of the mountain. With great difficulty he scrambled over steep rocks and forced a path through the tangled thickets, but when he reached the other side, the sound appeared to start from the place in which he had come. Then he had to go back all the way again. At the very top, where he stopped to rest, the barking was directly underneath him. And he knew in an instant where he was and what had happened.
Let my dog out at once, Bear Chief, cried he. If you do not, I shall destroy your palace.
But the bear chief only laughed and said nothing. The boy was very angry at his silence, and aiming one of his arrows at the bottom of the mountain, shot straight through it. As the arrow touched the ground, a rumbling was heard, and with a roar of fire broke out, which seemed to split the whole mountain into pieces. The bear chief and all his servants were burned up in the flames, but his sister and all that belonged to her were spared, because she had tried to save the two elder boys from punishment. As soon as the fire had burnt out, the little hunter entered what was left of the mountain. The first thing he saw were his two brothers, half bear, half boy. "Oh, help us," they cried, standing on their hind legs as they spoke, and stretching out their forepaws to him.
But how am I to help you?
Asked the little brother, almost weeping.
I can kill people and destroy trees and mountains, but I have no power over men.
And the two elder brothers came up and put their paws on his shoulders, and they all three wept together. The heart of the bear chief's sister was moved when she saw their misery, and she came up gently behind and whispered,
Little boy, gather some moss from the spring over there and let your brothers smell it.
With a bound, all three were at the spring, and as the youngest plucked a handful of wet moss, the other two sniffed at it with all their might. Then the bearskin fell away from them, and they stood upright once more.
How can we thank you? How can we thank you?
They stammered, hardly able to speak, and fell at her feet in gratitude. But the bear's sister only smiled and bade them go home and look after the little girl, who had no one to protect her. And this the boys did, and took such good care of their sister that, as small as she was, she soon forgot that she ever had a father or mother. Okay, yeah. Moss rubbed on an arm changes you to a bear. I'm not making notes of this at all. Ads are coming up. Again. Come on. No. No. I'm gonna shout her out even though she's attempting to work. But thank you all for coming in tonight. Let's see who is on. Looks like Lupin tried to stream and did not succeed. Any of the readers up? Yeah. No, don't see any readers. At least none of the ones on my usual list, anyway. So much scrolling. Okay, who is... Where is... Okay, Ori Dusk. Raid for fallen messengers. Raid for subscribers. And raid for dusk. I will hopefully see you all when I make an attempt at doing games. Hopefully. See you then.
Not so long ago, in a world full of strife, a man born a wolf, living a dual life. With magic in his veins, he walked the school hall, learning the arts, answering the call. But fear was a cloak he had to wear tight, hiding his truth, keeping darkness from light. Those who were scared turned away in despair, yet he bore the burden, he chose to take care. Now the times have changed, the monster's no longer scared. He's retired from magic, but his stories still flare, with tales of heroes, of legends so grand, selling dreams of the past across this vast land.